Meantime, China is driving a major shift in the Australian car market, with more new Chinese brands expected to arrive on our shores in the next 12 months. And to tell us more, we're joined this afternoon by Paul Marich from carexpert.com.au. Paul, good afternoon. So what are the positives and negatives with Chinese car brands? Because we know with all vehicles, there are the positives and the negatives.
Look, 5 or 10 years ago, Chinese car brands were nowhere in Australia. You wouldn't buy one either because they weren't safe. They weren't very good to look at either, but they have completely transformed the market. And what you see in China is that Chinese people themselves are moving away from legacy car brands and buying Chinese cars, which is a vote in confidence. We're seeing huge supplies of them here in Australia, and they have transformed from vehicles that were typically unsafe and not very good to cars today that compete head-to-head with legacy car brands.
So, Paul, you're in regional Victoria right now, test driving a number of cars we can see behind you. How do the Chinese vehicles compare to those big legacy brands?
We do extensive testing at Proving Ground to really just put the claims to the test to make sure that the Chinese cars do stack up against legacy car brands. And what we're finding is that these guys have hired engineers from the big named car brands, and as a result of that, they're implementing all the same technology you're finding in other cars. The tests that we're putting them up against show that they are at the benchmark or better than some of the other brands that have been on sale here for years.
Now, we know overseas, and especially in the US, there's a lot of regulation around Chinese vehicles. Why is that, and should other countries follow suit?
Look, China's manufacturing is on another level entirely. I was over there a few weeks ago and they manufacture things at huge scale and at very little cost. And they cannot, countries like the United States simply cannot compete with that volume of manufacturing. As a result of that, the Chinese brands are proliferating around the world, and this is why they're trying to block them from entering some of those markets where manufacturing is still present.
So what should people do or look out for if they are interested in buying some of these models?
Look, I know it's a bit of a cop-out. Do your research. Well, we do the research for you, but what we recommend people do is trying to buy from a brand that is established and that has a dealer network, because the last thing you need is a car company that's going to be out of business in 5 years' time. You'll end up with a car that you can't sell, you can't insure, and you can't get parts for. So just make sure you're buying from a brand that is established and that does have a proper presence and is there to support you.
Well, I was just about to ask you that question, because if you do, especially an EV, you need to ensure that there is proper dealer networks and also the battery life. In regards to making sure that they do last in Australia, what guarantees do we have that some of these brands will continue to exist?
Look, unfortunately, there are very few guarantees. We saw when Holden pulled out of the market here, while there were still some spare parts lying around, the big epidemic of stolen Commodores, GM just decided to do nothing about it. So I think that you have to be careful. General Motors was a massive company. Holden was huge in Australia. If we're not getting the service from them, you can barely expect a Chinese car company that's here for a few years and decides to leave to really care about the customers or uphold their rights to give the customers what they need. So that's why it's just important to make sure you're buying from a brand that has that presence and has the guarantees in place for you.
Paul, you mentioned earlier that you do test a lot of these vehicles. Exactly how do you test them?
They're long days, but we test everything from towing claims. A lot of brands will claim that they can tow 3.5 tonnes. We put a big old trailer on these cars and tow on quite a difficult long ascent. We do a lot of off-road testing here as well to make sure that cars can meet those claims. We do acceleration testing, brake testing, fuel economy testing. We literally put them through the ringer to make sure that when consumers are buying these cars, they have been independently tested and validated against the manufacturer's claims.
And you'd have lots of fun as well. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tash.